does issue the licenses for gas and electricity suppliers in the state. They have to come in, file an application. They have to show what they call technical and managerial competence. They have to sign all sorts of affidavits. The only thing that's good about that, they're signed under, they'll be committing perjury if they sign them falsely, so we can sometimes use that. They have to provide some financial history and integrity information. In some cases, they may have to get guarantees if they have a parent, and there's a new company, bonds that may have to be posted, and other things to ensure financial integrity. This is particularly for suppliers who have title to the electricity and are selling it to you. There is another category, they call them, it's very confusing in Maryland because suppliers actually have two components. One is suppliers, I know, it's who actually take title to the gas or electricity, and those are the people that you're really contracting with. They also refer to brokers, but the definition of suppliers is suppliers and brokers. Don't ask me why. This happened under the law in 1999. Brokers, you're used to them in real estate. Brokers are basically, kind of middlemen. They're not taking title. They may refer you off, to an actual supplier. You see it more with commercial and industrial customers. A broker actually does what you think a broker does. They'll go out and maybe talk to or review a number of different offers, come back and, say, look, based on what you've told me, here are 5 companies. This seems to be like a good offer. You can see that with industrial customers and commercial customers in particular. With residential customers, these brokers, what we have seen most often is a broker, which must have a license, actually works with one supplier. And I think that's one thing that people need to know. Sometimes you just see it on a website. They simply are going from a broker and handing you off to just one supplier. So they're not really doing what you think about. It's like, oh, this broker is like going out looking for the best deal for me. No, you're still on your own. So something to be careful of. Think about. So anyway, those are kind of the requirements. Commission kind of reviews that. The Public Service Commission has a technical staff, so they do the, basically the technical and financial review and provide comments to the Public Service Commission. Our role, because we see the applications, we send a bunch of questions to these companies, but because the staff is so involved with this, and they're the licensing agency, we are kind of focusing on disciplinary actions in other states because they're supposed to be revealing that information. So we kind of go in and do our separate backup check. We look at the website. If it's a new company, they're not going to have marketing and training materials, but we'll take a look at that. And we'll also be taking a look at it, soliciting customers without a license, which happens more frequently than you think. We're just trying to get ahead, just trying to get out in the marketplace. And we'll submit separate comments to the commission as well. The commission has to issue a letter order, a license number, and that's important because the license number has to show up in the contract. The commission itself also has a website, and they will have information so that you can check if you've been contacted by a company, is it licensed, is the license still in existence, and also whether they've got some active offers. There are a lot of different consumer protection rules, and in the state of Maryland, electricity and gas suppliers are subject to our state and federal consumer protection laws. This is a little bit different than other states. It was something that our agency made sure was put into the law back in 1999. So you actually have what they call dual or concurrent responsibility on consumer protection rules. The Attorney General's office enforces the Consumer Protection Act and consumer protection laws of the state of Maryland. But the Public Service Commission also has a role and has to make sure that these companies are complying with those general consumer protection laws. And the ones that you really need to be taking a look at are basically this unfair and deceptive practice kind of principle that we look at, and then very specifically, these suppliers have to comply with the Door-to-Door Solicitation Act. It's got very specific requirements. The Telephone Solicitation Act, very specific requirements. And even though those are generally enforced by the Attorney General's office, they have to comply with it, and the Commission has to oversee that. In addition to Montgomery County, I just wanted to point out, I do believe they have to have peddler's licenses. And so your local Office of Consumer Protection in Montgomery County government, deal with Eric Friedman quite a bit, would also be taking a look at that, and that would go to some door-to-door activity as well. So the Maryland Public Service Commission is kind of the lead agency on all of this stuff. And they should be looking at whether these companies are complying with all of these rules, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about what you should look for. Generally with regard to contracts, general rule, written contracts are required. So if written contracts are not available, that's the exception, not the rule. And I really cannot emphasize that more, particularly when we're talking about door-to-door activities and phone solicitation activities. There seems to be a lot of confusion out there, with suppliers in the marketplace in this state. Door-to-door is the Door-to-Door Solicitation Act. Is at any place other than, unless they've got like a fixed location. They come to your door, they're doing some kind of mall activity, set up something on the street, they've got to comply with the Door-to-Door Act, and that requires a written contract. Also, with door-to-door activities, you have a 3-day right of rescission. Most people think about this in terms of home improvement contracts. Applies to this kind of stuff as well. It's only in door-to-door that you're going to have a 3-day right of rescission. Telephone. The Telephone Solicitation Act does apply. There are some pretty narrow exceptions in the law, but for the most part, if it's a cold call, they're calling you, you're not calling them. If it's a cold call, they have to comply with the Act, which means you have to receive and sign a written contract after the call, otherwise the contract is void. The typical exemptions, for example, if it's a company you've been doing business with, they don't have to comply with this. Or if you made the call to them, they don't have to comply. Or if they've given you written materials in advance, and so you have the information. So they also have to disclose to you all material terms and conditions, as part of that contractual relationship. If the transaction is exempt, you made the call to them, you had an ongoing business relationship. They still have to disclose all the material terms and conditions over the phone. There has to be a third-party verification or recording, which they've got to maintain, and they still have to mail or send you a contract within 3 days. So those are things that the reason I point this out is we've talked to so many people, do not get the contracts, do not sign contracts, have no record of what it is they agreed to. So these are things that the companies have to comply with. If you're on the internet, the document has to be printable. When you're looking at it, you've got terms and agreements, you're doing a little check off on the box. They have to give you the capability to print that stuff out so that you can keep it for your records. Just keep in mind, there is no right of rescission unless it's a door-to-door contract. People are confused about this. They think even if it's done over the phone or through direct mail, they've got a right to think about it. You don't unless it's a door-to-door contract. Once you enter into it, you're kind of done. Also important to remember, most of these contracts have automatic renewal provisions, particularly these 12 and 24 months. You will get a 45-day advance notice. What we find is that people pitch mail from companies into the recycling bin, not paying attention. They forget that they signed up with a supplier. The notice comes in and they don't see it. automatic renewal, and what that means is it can be renewed at a higher price. So if you sign up with a supplier, whether you mark it on a calendar, do whatever you need to do, remind yourself, way down the line, this company is going to, send a renewal notice to you. You need to pay attention to it. You may find yourself rolling into a contract at a very high price. We saw this with gas suppliers back in 2008. There was a huge spike in the gas prices in the summertime. And people who had their automatic renewal notices coming in around that time, their gas was being renewed at something like $1.50 a therm. And I think Bernie knows that that's a rather high price to pay for gas when it came down to 50, 60 cents a therm shortly thereafter. We had a very cold winter, summer 2008, 2009, and a lot of folks got hit with very, very big bills for gas. With contracts, and again, these are requirements from the Public Service Commission. They've got to describe what services, they have to have a license number on the contract, disclose what the price terms are. Is this a fixed price contract? Is this a variable price contract? I'll talk about that a little bit. Is it month to month, 12 months, 14 months? It has to be disclosed. Deposits, almost no company is issuing deposit requirements. It doesn't make any sense anymore. But if they do, they have to tell you. Cancellations, they have to tell you what the circumstances under which you can cancel or they can cancel the contract, and what type of notice you have to provide, and what the cancellation fee is. I cannot underscore how important it is for you to pay attention when you're looking at contracts. Almost all companies have cancellation fees. These are $150, $200. Some of them are done on a percentage basis. If you have a contract, say for 24 months, you're 2 months into the contract and you decide somebody has a better deal and you're going to go with that, contract one gets canceled. One company we saw a few years ago, cancellation fees at $500 and $600. That's unusual, but the $150, $200 cancellation fees are not. So you need to pay attention to that. Most people get into trouble because they sign a contract with one company. A couple of months later, they get something in the mail, and they're looking at the price going, oh, this is a little bit cheaper than, supplier A. I'll go with this company. And you agree, maybe you get a phone call. Well, your first contract is automatically canceled. You're now with supplier B, and you're going to get a bill, basically, because supplier B is saying, okay, supplier A, you canceled our contract, $200.
Why does the PSC allow that?
There's no prohibition on cancellation fees, and a lot of contracts with all sorts of products, if you're looking at, going over a term, rental agreements, this and that, do have cancellation fees. The theory is that if suppliers are entering into a 12-month or 24-month contract, they're, when you're looking at the business, they are making business decisions out 12 or 24 months, to enter into contracts to back up the contract with you. And if you just cancel out the contract automatically, it negatively affects the company. That's kind of the theory behind allowing them cancellation fees. In some states, I believe Minnesota, some other states have set up regulations that put limitations on the amount of the fee that they can charge for cancellation. So some states have taken that step to limit the dollar amount. Hasn't been done here. So that's why we've seen many, many customers who've gotten into trouble over this. So we do want to emphasize, it's important to be aware of that. The automatic renewal, it will say the contract, is it an automatic renewal contract? And billing options, it said at this point they have to tell you, do they bill separately or do they use PEPCO? Almost everybody is using PEPCO. The reason is that the commission passed a rule a couple of years ago, it was over our objections, that PEPCO has to purchase the accounts receivable from the suppliers. So the supplier enters into a contract with you, goes through, you're now purchasing supply from the supplier. The supplier basically sells the account to Pepco. Pepco is now not only the billing agent, but the collection agent. And so the supplier no longer has to engage in debt collection. One important piece of that is to remember that Pepco can terminate your service, not only if you're past due on Pepco's part of the bill, but also the supplier part of the bill. So that was a change that was made a couple of years ago.
Is there any kind of information which you can compare one of these companies to another? Because when you get these things sort of piecemeal, they kind of drift into your mailbox, and you don't know whether that's a good deal or not, but you can't compare it to anything.
Well, I'll be talking a little bit later about the information on our website, our agency website, and information available from the Public Service Commission.
And that includes Pepco itself?
Yeah, yes, at least on our website, it makes it a little bit easier, kind of what their price is at a particular point and the supplier process. So we'll actually pull up the slide from my website.
If you're not looking at the contract terms, is it fair to say that whoever had the lowest number, that's the best deal?
I'll disclaim, I always have a disclaimer on anything when somebody asks me what's the best deal. Our agency honestly will not tell people this is the best deal because it is an individual decision. If you look, you can do a price comparison. If price is the driver and you're and you want, then you're going to look at the price and say that's best for me. But it's not just the price per kilowatt hour. You can compare that. Do you want a month-to-month contract? You may get a cheaper price that first month, but it's more volatile. That price can go up the next month. Do you want a 12-month fixed price? Do you want a longer period of time? Those are judgments that individual consumers are going to make. You might want a month-to-month contract because you'll take that risk because you want that lowest price that's charged in month 1 or month 2. Another person here may say that's a little too risky for me. I really need to know what the price is. So I'll go for a 12-month contract, a 24-month contract. I know that prices might come down a little bit in the future, but I want the security of knowing that this is the fixed amount I'm paying over the next 12 to 24 months. So you can do those comparisons. They're not easy, even with our information. It's not an easy thing to do. You can look at cancellation fees, see if they have a monthly charge. Some of these companies might charge you $5 a month. You have to calculate that as part of the cost of the, the supply.
Some of us have had some concerns about the source of energy, maybe wanting to stay away from nuclear power on the one hand, and use wind power wherever we can.
I'll be talking about those types of contracts in a few minutes.
How do you get out of the contract? If you sign a 12-month contract with an alternative provider, how do you escape an automatic rise in the rate or cancellation?
If you get an automatic, if it's a 12-month contract, you will get an automatic renewal notice. The renewal notice before the contract terminates will tell you you have to contact us by X date to cancel the contract. If you do not do that, the contract will renew. Typically, it will renew on a month-to-month basis, but again, you need to check the terms of the contract. It could renew on a fixed term. So that the notice that you're going to get will tell you you need to contact us by X date. If we don't hear from you, that's what an automatic renewal is. It's going to roll over.
Yeah. So
you have to contact.
How do you make sure you go back to a normal rate with Pepco, say?
Well, at that point, when you cancel, then your choice is: am I looking at other supplier offers? Do you want, you can then enter into a contract to start service with that other company when your other term expires, or you can go back to Pepco. You would have to make those decisions at that time.
If you don't have another supplier lined up to replace your prior supplier, you will go back to Pepco as your default supplier. They will always step in to fill any
Yeah.
gap that exists.
Yeah, you're never gonna be left without electricity or gas, you know, and that's an important point. But you have to make the choice, you know, if you don't make the choice, you go back to Pepco, but you have an opportunity to make a decision. Oh, I'm sorry, there's a gentleman back there.
Feel free to answer this later on if you're going to build these into your presentation anyway. But I thought the population was asking so many questions, I thought I'd get one in earlier. Two questions for you. To what extent does the Public Service Commission, or for that matter, even the legislature, have the authority to internalize some of the externalities of pollution caused by the generation of power, much of which we import from Ogden Valley, for example, and what into the rates? And secondly, to what extent does the Commission have the authority to adopt in-kind block rates so that we save even more by using less and pay more by using more per unit, pay more per unit in each class, industrial, commercial?
We'll talk about the first question in a few minutes when we're talking about the renewable energy contracts and something called the Renewable Portfolio Standard. With regard to the second question about inclining block rates, either the General Assembly could do it by legislation or the Commission could do it through regulation. Yes.
There seems to be a lag between the time at which you sign the contract with the suppliers and when the new terms kick in.
Yes.
And they typically say it will take 1 to 2 billing cycles. My experience has been that sometimes it drags on and you have to call them and you have to call Pepco and the supplier and say, look, I signed this contract on X date and it should have kicked in, you know, as of this time.
Mm-hmm.
I've found that if you stay on top of it, you know, they will go back and adjust it. But I don't understand why it takes, you know, that long, particularly if you're re-upping with a supplier that you've been using and you're signing another contract with them. Why would it take 2 billing cycles for them to put in the new rate? That seems, I can understand if it's a new company and they have to work out the, you know, transmission of information stuff with Pepco. But if it's the same third-party supplier, you're just signing up at a new rate. Why does it take 2 billing cycles to get the new rate to?
It should.
Because the problem is you sign up for a 12-month period, you only end up with 10 months of the fixed rate that you signed up for, because you lose the 2 months where they're not kicking the new rate in. I don't understand why there's this
Well, I
lag.
don't understand that second point. There are 2 pieces to the question, and this has to do with, and I'll start, you know, say you first sign up with the supplier, gas or electricity. You will see in the contracts or the comments that are sent to you that it is going to take a while before that contract kicks in, that first go-round. If you look at the Commission regulations, I can't remember the actual time for it, but some of it is a function of moving the stuff from the supplier to the utility and having to make those changes. But it's also dependent upon billing cycles, and everybody has a different billing cycle. So depending on when you sign the contract, at a particular point, you could be in the middle of a billing cycle, or it's just before, say it's a day before your billing cycle starts. It's not going to get processed in time for it to start, you know, that next day or 5 days from now. So it's going to be several weeks down the line before that first contract kicks in. That is a function in a slightly different process with the gas and electricity companies, but that's what's going to happen. Second question, I don't know why it should take that long, and I suspect there is a problem with the supplier sending the information about the rate change to the billing agent, which is Pepco. Pepco will only and can only bill based on information they're going to get from the supplier. So if there's a rate change, it's up to the supplier to get that information. So one of the difficulties that customers have, because now they're dealing with 2 entities over a billing dispute, the supplier and Pepco. which does not make it very easy. You have to first go to the supplier. In that instance, it's like the supplier has the information, they're supposed to send it to Pepco. But you also may need to deal with Pepco because they're the billing agent, and they will just keep billing you whatever the third-party supplier tells them to. And their response will be, not our problem. That's the supplier's problem, you've got to go talk to them. Bottom line, if you have a billing dispute, whether it's the amount, the rate amount, when it kicks in, this, that, and the other thing, and you can't get it resolved to your satisfaction, you file a complaint with the Public Service Commission. What I do tell people is file a complaint against both the supplier and Pepco. Make sure that things don't fall between the cracks. The supplier is the one that you have the contract with, but Pepco is the billing agent. So, and the reason you want to protect yourself with regard to Pepco as the billing agent is they can terminate your service over a dispute that you have with the supplier. So it makes it difficult, slightly difficult and confusing for customers when you have a problem. So go to the supplier first, go to Pepco, you can't get it resolved, file a complaint, you can do it online with the Public Service Commission, name both of them to protect your rights and ensure that you're not going to get a service termination notice while you're trying to, kind of work out a rate problem.
I don't mean to be the time Scrooge, folks, but you have a lot of great questions, and we will get to them all, and I think a lot of them will come in the course of this, but because we're running a little behind schedule, Paul has to be back to work by Tuesday, I think. So, if we could let her go through that, then she'll stick around a little bit, and we'll get to everybody's questions. Okay,
in the interest of time, could you tell us what the timeline is?
We were supposed to be done about 15 minutes ago. And there's still, another 6 or 7 slides to go
about
through?
6 or 7 slides, and I'll, certainly talk with you.
Could we maybe get to some of the minutiae online or do an FAQ and turn it over now to Q&A? Because what I really wanted was to come here and learn, how many alternate suppliers are out there. What I'm hearing today, I feel like I'd love to look to the town to recommend it to you, because how many of us are going to be able to go through all this minutiae?
I think we're going to get to that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So if you'll be a little more patient, I think we'll get to what you're looking
that's
for.
kind of
I see it as the bottom line bullet point on this slide, actually, so I think we're there.
With regard to contracts, as I said, one thing to look out for is it a fixed price contract, is it a variable price contract? What that means is it changes from month to month. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about variable price contracts because we've seen some negative experiences with those contracts. You've got to be careful for. Fixed price just means you pay the same amount per kilowatt hour. That's the unit of usage. And it's for 12 months, 24 months. We used to see some 36-month contracts. Sometimes, again, there's a separate monthly fee. With regard to price comparisons, if the supplier is making a comparison itself, they're saying, we are charging 10% less. Our price is less than the utility price. If they use anything that is comparing it to the utility price, they've got to give you the utility price so that you can see what the actual comparison is. To get to part of the question that you mentioned in the back, our agency has price comparison sheets, and you want to bring that up? I'll just let you, it's up on our website. We've been doing this since May of 2007. Once a month, I have one of my employees, as one of his many tasks, go on the websites of the companies that we know are active in each service territory. We've got several service territories to cover. And we will take a look at the contract offers on that day. So we have all sorts of qualifications. These are website offers, and at the beginning of the month, typically, and we will provide information as to the contract. And if you can see this, or you can see it online, it tells you, when we say electric, it just means that there's no differentiation in terms of source of energy. In some cases, they will say renewable, or they'll say wind energy. So some of these companies may have 6, 7, or 8 different types of offers. And if it is partly renewable, it will be designated. It will tell you the length of the contract. If there's an extra fee, for example, on Spark Energy, you'll see there's a $4.95 monthly fee on top, that you pay on top of the usage. Cancellation fees we're listing, so you can take a comparison. And then we will also just display the fixed price. If it's not a variable price, we will put up the fixed price. We do have caveats, so you can kind of go down if you want to scroll down a little bit. Now this one is, we have it for BG&E, PEPCO, for all the utilities, and I have got a sample for the PEPCO area for December. But you can see in BG&E's, there are a number of companies out there, and these are the basic terms of the contract. So at least it will give you a guide, kind of a sense of, if you're interested in renewable wind energy, which companies to contact, and what the price range is. And then you may want to follow up on that.
So these are December prices we're looking at, and there'll be a January 1 in...
Yeah, Jean is on vacation for a couple of days, so we won't be able to post that till probably next week. But it's generally done at the beginning of the month. The other source of information is on the Public Service Commission website. If you go on their homepage, there's a little light bulb, and it says shopping for electricity. And you can go on there, and for PEPCO, there's a way to find out who has supplier offers. I have to be honest. We have the information doesn't always line up with information that we have. It's not always current, and frankly, I will make a pitch. We have had people basically saying that they prefer, even the suppliers prefer the way that we have at least provided the information to people. It's a little bit easier, a little bit more transparent, but again, I have to emphasize it's just a snapshot. If you see some companies, some offers that you're interested in, particularly if you're interested in renewable or wind energy, at least this will give you a pathway to say, oh, okay, there look like 4 or 5 companies have types of offers that I'd be interested in, and you can go on their websites. They have to maintain websites with information.
Paula has to qualify her remarks, obviously, because of her permission, but having used this chart myself several times over the last few years to switch suppliers at appropriate times, it's been my experience that it's generally very current, even though they can't say that it is, because they're updating it month to month. The suppliers usually aren't changing their pricing terms that quickly or that dramatically. So you'll find that they are mostly about what you'd see. And I think it's also very useful too, because it allows you to compare between how much extra am I going to pay if I choose to use a renewable source versus what we'll call here dirty power, so to speak, right? You will find that there is a variation, and so you kind of have to put that into your calculus. How much is it worth to you as an individual to support these renewable sources in light of how much you're going to pay each month extra?
Paul, could you give us what is the website that we go to?
And all the information is up here, but it's our agency website. Actually, if you type in Maryland Office of People's Counsel, the link is opc.state.md.us.
Also, I'd like to say that on our committee webpage, we will have links to these resources. After this presentation, come to our committee page, we'll put up salient links to the town website. On the town website, our committee has a page on the town website. On that page, we will be providing links to this presentation and to the resources.
And if you left your email address on the sign-in sheet and requested that you be delivered the presentation or the links, we'll find a way to get you this information as well.
So as I said, this is a way, when we say, that was a good point, it is generally, it's a good guide, we think. You may get special offers in the mail. You may get contacted with promo codes. We can't monitor all that kind of stuff. So you may get some different or better deals through direct contact, but we can't monitor those things. Yes?
Is it safe to assume that a company cannot invoke the cancel unless in the, time frame of the contract membership.
It has to be in the contract. They have to tell you.
If you're finished on the 12 to 24 months and you're choosing otherwise, they can't go to.
There are two things that you'll have to see in the contract. The cancellation fee goes to what you cancel early. If you've got a 12-month and you try to cancel in 8 months, the cancellation fee may be invoked. The automatic renewal means at the end of the term, they have to have both of those things in the contract. If it's going to automatically renew, they have to tell you in the contract. If there's nothing that says automatic renewal, it will not automatically renew. So if you don't do anything, you'll go back to Pepco, or you can take action with another supplier.
You know, and one thing I wanted to add too before people drift off is that if we together, if there are enough people in this community who want to buy a clean energy option, we can negotiate a better price than this. And we will make that available to everybody who's given us their email in case you want to sign up as a group for a little bit better deal than you might get as an individual. So I'll let you know for that too. You want to go back?
So we will, and as I said, we'll be posting some new information and probably next week.
So do you have that same chart for gas?
Yes, we do this both for gas and electricity companies. So if you're looking at gas supply alternatives, I mean, one of the things we found, it's changing now, but for a period of about 2.5 to 3 years, because we saw a real significant increase in the number of people signing up with gas suppliers. But for at least 2.5 years, those prices were higher than the utility price. But it's set up in the same format. So we do, encourage people to take a look at this information. Very quickly, I think I'm gonna get the hook soon. So.
Just without going into detail, you have a similar approach to telecommunications, phone and cable.
Telephone is, I'm not getting into telephone right now. No, it's a whole different ballgame.
Does your office even deal with it, or is
Yes, we deal with telecommunication service. Landline service is the only regulated service, which is the wired service, whether it's copper, whether it's fiber. Voice over Internet Protocol, just very briefly, is not regulated. The General Assembly passed a law a few years ago, again over our objections, and exempts VoIP service from regulation in the state of Maryland, which is going to be an issue in the coming years.